Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am very excited to have on the program today Bill Echols. He is an administrator of professional learning, supporting K-12 needs in the area of professional learning communities and coaching in Wake County Public Schools in North Carolina. Bill, welcome to Transformative Principal.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to spend some time with you on your podcast today.
Well, thanks, man. I'm excited to talk to you. You and I met at the New Team Habits conference in Denver a few months ago, and I just really loved your approach to life. And one of the things that you did that I was so impressed by is you took notes on how they led their PD and then shared them with everybody that was there experiencing that also. And I just thought that was so honorable and so cool of you to do that. And I don't know if I've told you that yet, but I just really respect you for being detail oriented and focused and organized enough to be able to pull that off. It was awesome.
Oh man, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your story, about how you got to where you're at. We don't need the whole life story for 2 hours, sure, but just give us the highlights.
Sure. So born and raised in a small town in Virginia called Martinsville. Most people know it from NASCAR. We have a short track there. And just kind of fast forward, I received my undergraduate degree from Hampton University, a small Black HBCU, a small private HBCU in Hampton, Virginia. Studied psychology there. I taught for a couple of years in my hometown, ironically, at the same middle school that I attended growing up. I taught there for 2 years and then went back and got my master's in school counseling at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. And my goal was to just spend a couple of years in school counseling, kind of building up experiences to go into administration. And so I said, I'll spend 3 years in school counseling. I blinked and it was 11 years. I felt like just middle school in general is just such a calling, man. And I really appreciated that relationship that I had with students and staff. And that kind of led me down the path of professional learning. I began putting together some things for best practices around working with students, ways to build relationship with administrators. And it kind of branched out and started doing some work on my own with community colleges and kind of the next steps I attribute Twitter to my current role in professional learning. At the time, the director of professional learning, we knew each other from Twitter, but we had never met face to face. And I had started tweeting a bunch of things around, my program. I'm working on my doctorate in organizational leadership and started promoting some of the things that I was doing, some of the professional learning I was doing with other school districts and community colleges. And she reached out, we had a conversation, and lo and behold, I interviewed for the position in our district. And the next week they offered me the job. And it just, that I feel like kind of speaks to the power of Twitter and the networking through social media. So yeah, I think just that unique background of, relationships being a huge foundational piece for me, especially as a school counselor and serving as a liaison between staff and students many times, and now having an even bigger impact on student outcomes by working with adults, their mindset, and helping them become better professionals.
So I can confidently say that every job that I've gotten since I joined Twitter in 2007 has been, one, a promotion, and because of networking on social media. And that is just incredibly powerful. The thing that's scary to me now is that we've put all of our effort and trust into these social media platforms, and they're starting to betray that trust. And and making it so that, you got to pay to connect with everybody, and you got to pay to have people see what you're doing.
Yes.
It's all about boosting your posts. And I really think that the next wave is going to be us owning our communication with the people that want to be with us. And, just this week, I sent out an email pretty regularly to people who listen to the podcast and follow me on social media. And that's a direct connection with those people that, I don't have to go through a gatekeeper. And just this last week, I sent something out, and one person told me that they were doing the thing that I suggested in the email. And it's like that kind of one-on-one connection is really, really powerful. And that's what the power of Twitter is connecting with people. It's not just being out there and sharing stuff and following people, but it's actually making those connections. And it's so much more than just, using a tool. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective on that idea of the relationships that you form on the web and in person with people you're working with.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I agree 100%. I think, we people often, and organizations and companies often find a way to try to monetize things, or, I mean, that's a much larger conversation around like capitalism and, and greed and monetization of just networking and connections. But it's so true. I think, platforms like Twitter or, Facebook, I feel like those, and I often refer to connections on social media as just that, as connections. Like people say, oh, you have this many followers, or, oh, what do your followers look like? And I don't use the language of followers. I often say just, oh, we're connected on Twitter, or not like you follow me on Twitter. And I think we can have those authentic relationships. And again, like both of us, we just shared examples of, moving up in our professions and in our career through networking, through social media, specifically Twitter. And I think those conversations and that the dialogue that happens in those spaces can be just as meaningful. And a really quick example, there's a Black Male Educators Talk group, BME's Talk, and it's a space for Black male educators to connect virtually. And just, I guess, Black males being kind of unicorns or rare in so many spaces, especially in the classroom. It's hard to kind of find that network. And I feel like that's been a great way to kind of leverage that learning community and have people connect and feel supported at a distance. And I feel like, even like attending conferences, like one thing that I do to kind of, I feel like I'm a people collector. Like in the book, Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, you talk about like mavens and connectors. I definitely feel like I'm a connector and a collector of people. So when I go to conferences, for example, like Learning Forward, like I start a Twitter list, and everyone that I meet face to face at the conference, I add them to that list. So every year I attend the conference, I have a running tab of who I met and like kind of a quick story behind how we connected. And I guess that just kind of speaks to how we can maintain those face-to-face relationships virtually when we have the opportunity to meet people in real life. It's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, that's a great strategy for managing the people you meet, is to create a Twitter list to have them on there. I think that's really great. I want to go back to this idea that you talked about with Black males being like unicorns. I think that is a really powerful way to explain that. And I think about the Black male students that I had and their lack of role models in so many areas. And the role models that they would turn to would be people that you really don't want to be role models for our kids, and we had this opportunity to get a tutor into our school, and we met this guy who was a Black male. And I gotta tell you, once he came into our building, Phil, it totally changed things, because all those young Black men had someone to look up to now. And the way that he could connect with them and the way that he could communicate with them was not anything that I could do, no matter how hard I tried. And that to me was so powerful. The power of having a role model, a unicorn out there. I just thought that was so awesome and so good for those for those boys to have, and for the girls too.
Mm-hmm.
But especially for the boys, they had someone to look up to. And I really think that that's powerful. So I've never thought of it like unicorns, but I love that phrase. It really drives home that there's something magical about it.
Yeah, yeah. And again, not everywhere, but in many spaces, I guess we are small in numbers. And I find that in our area, like in my school district particularly, there is a large amount of African American males moving into like administration, kind of moving up the ladder
Mm-hmm.
in a sense, but not necessarily staying in the classroom. And so I like, and just kind of sharing a personal example. So the middle school that I worked at when I was a few years back as a school counselor, like my staff, it was about, we had like 100+ staff members total, about 1,200 students in the entire school. And of those 100+ staff members, we had about 7 African Americans on staff, and myself, another school counselor, the school resource officer, 2 keyboarding teachers, and 2 custodians. And there was a very small percentage of African Americans in the building. And people would always ask, like, oh, like, Echols, why do you stay at the school? Like, you could be at another school where there's a higher percentage of minority students who might need to see you or might need your presence or your mentorship. And, I kind of pushed back a little and said, yes, I could be in those spaces, but I said, I feel like I'm just as needed in this space because other people need to see African American males in these positions also. And it's not just, for many students, I guess, working up to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, not even just being an African American male, but I may have been one of the few males that students have even interacted with in a school building. So, I mean, and I know a friend of mine, there's research behind, anyone can make connections and encourage and motivate students. I mean, having a certain background can help form and forge relationships a little bit faster in certain instances. But, all educators can reach students. And I just feel like, that representation needs to be seen by all students that will be contributing members to society as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really powerful story, Phil. I think one of the things that I admire about you is this idea of being able to think deeply about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And, we've only known each other a little bit, but I already feel like that is like a hallmark of who you are. And is that something that is a talent you have honed, or is that something that you feel like you were born with? Or what's the story on you thinking so deeply about things?
Man, that's a really good question. and and honestly, I attribute my parents. First of all, DNA. my father.
Yeah.
My father is a minister, and he is retiring this month, December, and he has been at the same church for 43 years as a pastor.
Wow.
And
that's longevity.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Longer than I've been alive. They moved here. They moved there. My parents moved to Martinsville a couple years before I was born, and my mother was she was a retired first grade teacher. She had 30+ years in education, and so I just kind of think about, I guess, the patience and consideration and care and just kind of social justice aspect that my parents had. And I think a lot of my patience and reflection comes from them, so I feel like I had a pretty good head start in life, just with it being a part of the fabric of my household and a part of kind of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is something that I have been working on as well, just with like emotional intelligence. I recognize that I do have what I consider to be a pretty high level of emotional intelligence, but it's something that I'm cognizant of and have just wanted to really work on, especially in the profession of like school counseling and adult learning, of just having that patience and being a reflective practitioner.
Mm-hmm. So what is it that you do to help yourself get better and improve on a regular basis?
I think I always, and well, I don't want to say always, but one thing that I do is I often ask myself, I guess before entering spaces, before even starting my day, I kind of enter spaces with the mind frame of who do I need to be in this space. And I often ask myself the question, and I've tweeted about this too. So when I sit down in meetings, sometimes you'll see that I jot down in the top right hand corner of the agenda or on a post-it note, I'll put a couple of things that I feel like I need to do or who I need to be. And it might be a listener, it might be a leader, it might be an idea generator, it might be a paraphraser for clarity. Like I'm always just trying to ask myself before entering a space, like what skills do I really need to bring to the table and which hat do I need to have on in this space? And then I just kind of evaluate, at the end of each day, was I who I needed to be? And I feel like that has just become a habit of mine over time of just reflecting on how am I bringing my best self to the table in every space every day.
And so when you go into those meetings and you think of the kind of person that you need to be, what influences that decision? How do you know what kind of person you need to be in that meeting?
Sure. And just kind of tying back into relationships too, just from group dynamics, one person can change the entire temperature of a group or a room. You think about like a PLC like meeting on their grade level hallway or in their core classrooms, and you add an assistant principal or you add a school counselor or a helpful living teacher, and that can change the entire dynamics of the group. The relationships of the people at the table require different things from different people. So I kind of, one thing that I do is just consider, who is at the table, and given any past experiences I might have had in either previous meetings or in one-on-one conversations, I really try to be mindful of what types of skills and things I need to place on the table with this group. And I think again, it's just a mindfulness and being able to kind of read who is in the room and just paying attention to myself and others, which is one of the norms of collaborative work. But just really going into those spaces, paying attention to myself and recognizing, whether the people might need, and just giving grace too, just presuming positive intentions that we all come to the table with different experiences, different backgrounds, different needs. We've all had, depending on which side of the bed we all woke up on that morning. It's just a lot of dynamics are at play. So I always just try to presume positive intentions and pay attention to myself and others that are at the table.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I'm an external processor. I'm an extrovert. I'm someone who thinks by talking, and I've noticed this about myself and done some things to try to help myself be better about that. And one of the things that I do when I go into meetings is I don't always do this, but when I'm being thoughtful and reflective, which is not as often as I would like to say, is I make a little diagram on my paper and I note, who's all sitting where. And then I put a little X through them every time they say something so that everybody else says something before I say something. And I got to tell you, that is incredibly difficult for me because I love to talk. I love to have a conversation, but I know that I can be overbearing and I know that I can come across as having all the answers. And that's not necessarily what I want it to be.
Yes.
I want to be helpful and supportive. And so for me, being able to do that one little thing is trying to take a page out of your book and trying to say, okay, what do I need to do here? And for me, I need to listen most of the time. And that's just a difficult thing for me that, I'm just not very good at. And it takes a lot of effort. And I have to draw that out and mark off people who have talked so that I don't take up the whole entire conversation. And that's a tough thing for me to do, but I've found such benefit in doing it because it gives other people opportunities to talk and be who they need to be in that meeting also.
Man, absolutely. That's a great strategy, especially, kind of given your podcast and your role as an administrator, many times, your idea can be very leading, within conversation.
Yeah.
And that's great to kind of hear the perspective of everyone else at the table first, giving them an opportunity to kind of share their voice and place ideas on the table, and then sharing yours. No, look, I'm jotting notes down as you're talking to add some
Yeah.
pages to my book.
Yeah. So the other thing that I've done with that, with what you just said, as the administrator, your ideas can be very leading. Another thing that I've done is I've spoken first at times to say, to be leading intentionally, to say this is the direction that either the district says we have to head, or these are the non-negotiables, or these are the things that we're working on, or whatever, to lay that groundwork and say, here's the frame in which we can work. And I'm definitely not a detail person, so everybody else can work on all the details, but here's the big vision that I need to establish. And then, I don't care what happens next. You guys, I trust you that you're going to do awesome work. And that's been another strategy that I use to help get myself out of the way and say, here's all I'm going to say. And then I can stop talking and let everybody else, come up with the different ideas. And that's been really successful as well. Is there anything else about relational leadership that you feel we need to talk about? I mean, this podcast is almost over, and I feel like we just started talking 2 seconds ago. So
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes by quick.
Well, just a couple of things that I really wanted to just touch on were, relationships are foundational. And this is something where my perspective has shifted over the years, is that I'm such a relationship oriented leader and person, that sometimes I can be too heavy on the relationship and we don't get everything done that we need to do. I guess when someone like me is trying to balance participation and make sure every voice is heard and make sure everyone's had their say, sometimes we don't get to the meat of a meeting. So I took a course a few years back called Facilitative Leadership, and it talked about the dimensions of success. And it was just this equilateral triangle between relationships, processes, and tasks. And so, recognizing that relationships sometimes can be overlooked as such a foundational or integral component of success in whatever success might look like. And when we focus too heavily on tasks or processes, it's not as long standing because it's missing that foundational piece of relationships. And just one other thing that I wanted to highlight from, I guess, the research is a theory called leader member exchange theory. And it focuses on, within the relational leadership umbrella, it focuses on three components: the leader, the follower, and the exchanges between those two. And most leadership theories just focus on the leader and the characteristics and attributes that leader has, but this is one of the few that focuses on the exchange between the leader and follower, because they both bring something to the table. And I guess the higher quality exchanges between the leader and follower, the better the results. And leaders often have in groups and out groups. So, if you're in a leader's in group, there are benefits to that. And so, you're the go-to person for inside information. You get additional responsibilities. You often receive tasks that you're interested in, or you get first priority in tasks. But kind of if you're in the out group, there may not be extra work or extra opportunities. You might not be in the know with information. If you need a day off, it's a little bit more difficult. So I guess the goal for relational leadership is to harness that collective relationship with everyone, but also individually make people or help people feel like they are in the in group. How do you level the playing field with access to information? How do you make everyone feel like they matter and that their voice is heard? And I recognize that's very exhausting given the day-to-day ins and outs of administrators or leaders. But if we think about like turnover in buildings, or people feeling valued, or people feeling like they have equal opportunity for advancement and support in buildings, relational leadership is definitely a way to go, and a way to really help people feel valued and supported.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot of great stuff there. One of the pieces that I want to comment on is that idea of the leader member exchange theory. And I'm reading a book right now called The Coaching Habit. I think is what it's called.
Oh, yes. I've heard of it.
Yeah, I'm really liking it a lot. I just started it, but so far that's what it is really all about. The coaching habit: say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. And really, I haven't read it all the way yet, but I'm pretty sure the focus is going to be there's a leader, there's a follower, and the exchanges between those, which the leader can control by asking good questions and by not talking as much. They can control those good quality exchanges between them, which will make the relationship, the leadership, the followership, all of that better through that process of not talking as much and listening and asking questions. So I think that that's really, really, really valuable. So, Phil, if people want to follow you on Twitter, they go to Phil Echols. That's your handle on Twitter. Is that right?
Yes, and I often joke and say, man, Phil Echols everything. I cornered the market on Phil Echols. So yeah, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Phil Echols everything, even PhilEchols.com.
Absolutely awesome. So the last question I ask is, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
I would say one of the most valuable things a principal could do this week is to just be more mindful of their interactions with their individual interactions with all of their staff members. It's so easy to get caught up in, the people that are in your in group or the people that you regularly connect with and lean on. But what are your interactions? Like, how can you be more mindful and intentional with the individual interactions with each one of your staff members?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Phil, once again, thank you so much for being part of Transformative Principal. And everybody, make sure you go check out Phil Echols everywhere. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, this is Jethro. Thanks so much for listening to that episode of Transformative Principal. I hope that you enjoyed it. And I want to remind you, I am going out on my own. So I'm looking for opportunities to help schools implement things that are related to student-driven learning. So if you'd like to work with me, please go to jethrojones.com and you'll be able to enter your information there and we can schedule a chat to talk and figure out how we can help move kids forward and be in control of their own learning. Thanks so much. That's jethrojones.com.